Thank you so much. All right, so hi everyone. So today I'm gonna just kind of go over the SAT reading session with you guys. So first we're just gonna watch a video that kind of goes over some study tips to help you with the reading section. And then I'm going to show you an entire SAT reading section. We're just gonna kind of briefly go through it. I'm gonna show you what the passages look like, what the questions look like. And then together we'll read one passage and I'll kind of go through my thought process for each of the 10 questions in that one section. And then finally, I'll open it up for if you guys have any questions or concerns. All right, so let's get started. First, we're going to watch a brief little video. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah, okay. All right. Let me just play this video.
Hi, this is Chris, the SAT expert at Magoosh. For the last 15 plus years, I've been helping students ace the SAT. Today, we're going to talk about 10 helpful tips for the reading section. Okay, the first tip on reading is to make sure to read the passage first and then do the questions. Why is this such an important tip? Well, many people have heard the exact opposite. They think you can just read the questions and then go back to the specific part of the passage and get the answer right. But the thing about it is the test writers know that people are trying to do this. And so they specifically create questions where you have to have a big understanding of all of the passage, or you're likely to fall for one of the traps they lay. Always make sure to read the passage first, then do the questions. The next tip is don't drown in the details. What I mean by this is each reading passage has lots of information. We're talking about 800, 900 word long passages. It's easy to get stuck in the paragraph and reread the same line over and over again as you try to take it all in. The thing is, to answer the questions correctly, you don't need to understand and absorb every single detail in the passage. Instead, you should get a big picture understanding. And what I mean by that is be able to give a quick one-sentence summary for each paragraph as soon as you're done reading it. Of course, you're not actually going to write that down, but in your head, if you could pause for a second and say, oh, that paragraph was about ABC, then you're totally fine. But if you say, oh, well, that paragraph was about, let me go back. Oh, wait, what's this detail? And that's when you start drowning. You don't want to drown. You just want the big picture understanding, because that's exactly what the questions will test you on. The next tip is don't let the answer choices do the thinking for you. Now, what I mean by that is many of us, as soon as we read a question, we dive straight into the answer choices. We want to try to get that answer as quickly as possible and move on. But I want you to avoid that temptation and instead, as soon as you read the question, figure out where in the passage the information is to answer that question. When you do that, you actually have to think about what the passage is saying at that specific point. And so you can answer the question yourself and then go to the answer choices to see which answer best matches up with the answer that you just came up with. On the other hand, if you just dive straight in there, you start trying to make the answer choices work. And that's when they do the thinking for you, and that's when you're likely to fall for a trap. The next tip is to know why the wrong answer choices are wrong. And so just because you got a couple of questions right and you know why the right answer is right, doesn't mean that that's always going to help you on the harder questions. If you know which traps that the SAT test writers actually come up with, then you're far less likely to fall for them. And one way to know this is to actually look at the wrong answers, the one you didn't pick maybe, and figure out, well, what made it wrong? Even though it was really tempting, I was about to pick it, why did I pick it at the end? And once you develop that ability, you're going to be far less likely to fall for all of those traps that the test writers lay for you. And speaking of traps, the next tip is if one part of the answer choice is wrong, the entire thing is wrong. What I mean by that is the test writers will come up with the perfect answer choice and it will just pull you in. You'll want to circle it and say, wow, this is great. I know I got it right. But at the very end of the answer choice, they slip in that one word that makes the entire thing wrong. And so what you want to be doing is actually looking for not every single word that's perfect, but looking for that one word that would make the entire answer choice wrong. And you know, if you find that, then you can get rid of that answer choice and not fall for that trap. The next tip and another trap, an answer is wrong if it mentions something that is not in the passage at all. Oftentimes what the test writers will do is they will have an answer choice that sounds right. It's based on common sense. Most people would agree with that. But it's not actually mentioned in the passage, and therefore it cannot be the right answer. So don't just pick something because you agree with it in general or it sounds good. Always make sure that you can point to some part of the passage, a specific paragraph, where you can find evidence to support an answer. The next tip is about the reading section itself. There are 5 passages on there, and the key here is not every passage is created equally. There are easy passages, maybe a reading section about a person's struggle as they learn something new. It's a work of fiction. You can identify with the person, sounds really easy. And then the next passage you see is about a 19th century scientist writing about their experiment with this complex chemical, which no one can relate to. So knowing that, what should you do? Well, you should go for the easy passages and easy questions first, so you know that you've definitely gotten those ones right. And then towards the end, if you have time for the harder passages, fine, go ahead and do those. The next tip is learn where you struggle. We talked a second ago about not every passage being the same. And for you, an area or a type of passage you might be very good at, maybe your friend isn't so good at. So learn where you struggle, take a practice test, figure out not just the types of passages, but the question types that you continue to miss. For instance, if there's a pattern and you tend to miss these inference questions, as they're called, then hey, that's good to know. That's an area that you need to work at. But the key is finding out where you can improve at, not just doing practice passage after practice passage, hoping you're going to get better. The next tip is to take a practice test. It's only under these conditions, when you're timing yourself and you're slogging through one passage after the other, that you can know what your weakness is. For instance, I've had students before who are really good at these passages as long as they're getting one at a time and then taking a break and doing something else. But when they get to that 4th passage on the real test or on a practice test, they start to fatigue and get tired. And that's where they make these careless mistakes. Well, learning something like that is great because it can help you test day, but unless you're taking these practice tests, you're not going to know that. And so the key is take a practice test, not a day before, but weeks before the actual exam, because it's going to help you figure out why you're missing things so that you don't miss them on the actual test. The next tip is a little bit every day goes a long way. What do I mean by that? Well, it's easy to think that you're making progress when you sit there, roll up the sleeves, and for 3 hours you do nothing but these reading passages. And truth be told, you've probably made a little bit of progress after that time. But if you wait an entire week to do the same kind of practice, guess what? You're going to lose a lot of what you built up in those few hours. So every day, do a little bit of reading practice. And maybe it doesn't even have to be every day, but do it 4 or 5 times a week. Sit there, read a passage, do the questions, cost you maybe 15 minutes, and then go off and do whatever else you need to do. But doing it that way versus the 3-hour Saturdays is going to help you in the long run. If you like what you saw today, then follow the link in the description.
Okay. So again, that was just a little video kind of going over the tips, and we are just going to review them again. So again, number 1, you always want to make sure that you read the passage first and then do the questions. So I know people sometimes say read the questions first and then kind of just go through the passage and find it. But like he said, you want to get an idea of the entire passage, paragraph by paragraph, like what is this passage saying? Number 2, don't drown in the details. And so you should be able to give a short summary of each paragraph in your head. Again, you don't have to write this down, but just so you have an idea of what each paragraph again is saying. Number 3, don't let the answer choices sway you. So read the questions before the answers and then find where the information is in the passage and try to answer the question on your own, and then look at the answers to see which one matches your answer. Sometimes they try to trick you and confuse you, and a lot of the answers sound like they could be right. But again, you want to make sure that it is the most correct answer, and you want to be able to find evidence from the passage that's going to support that. Number 4, you have to know why an answer is wrong. So again, there could be tricky answers. It could seem like it's right, but that kind of goes into number 5. If one part of the answer is wrong, then the entire answer is wrong. So make sure you're reading the entire answer. So again, you know what is wrong and what is right. Number 6, if an answer is wrong if it mentions something that isn't in the passage at all. So always refer back to the passage. And we'll kind of see this when we are going through one of the passages. We'll kind of see how this can be tricky. And then number 7, not every passage is equal. Again, there's easy and difficult ones. Again, go for the easy passages first, because again, you're being timed throughout this entire SAT. So you want to make sure that you kind of get through the easy passages first, so then you can spend more time, or at least make sure that the easy passages are right before you move on to the more difficult ones. Number 8, again, learn where you struggle, find areas where you need to improve. And again, we'll see this as we go through the passage. You'll kind of see maybe you have trouble with vocabulary, or maybe you have trouble with certain aspects of reading comprehension. You'll kind of figure that out as you take the practice tests, which again takes us into 9. Take practice tests, and I'll show you guys some resources online where you can take these practice tests, and a lot of them have the answer sheets, and it can tell you how to score yourself, so that can be really helpful. And then again, number 10, do a little bit of studying every day, 4 to 5 times a week. That's really going to help you. Again, like he said, if you do one full practice test and leave it alone for a week or two, it's not really going to help you. You can do kind of bits and pieces every day. So you could do one reading passage a day and answer the questions. Hope that all makes sense. And again, if you guys have any questions throughout, feel free to stop me. Again, we're going to do questions at the end, but if anything is confusing or if I'm moving too fast, feel free to have me slow down or answer any questions for you guys. Okay, so I'm going to show you an SAT reading section, and I'm going to just kind of show you like the format of the entire reading section before we dive into one specific passage. Okay. So again, this is the reading test. It says 65 minutes and there's 52 questions. So as you can see, the passages aren't too long. This one is a little over a page. There's like 70 lines, and then it's followed by 10 questions. And again, we'll kind of go into the format of these questions when we do the individual passage. So then again, there's another passage that comes with a graph. So some of these will have graphs that will try to throw you off, and some of them won't. Don't let these intimidate you in any way. Just make sure you look at the graph and you understand it, because it will help you when you get through to the questions. So again, it's a little bit shorter of a passage, but there is that graph there. Okay, and then these are the questions that go along with it. And all of the questions kind of follow the same kind of format throughout. So you'll see kind of repeats in the language. It just kind of goes with a different passage. Okay. And there's about 10 questions for each passage. And then this is passage number 3. This one is pretty short. And then there's also some graphs that go along with it. So again, make sure that you read the passage and you understand the graphs that are given to you. Here we have some more questions. Again, they all follow a very similar format that we'll dive into. And then this is the 4th passage. It actually comes with 2 passages. Typically, this is done to kind of compare and contrast. And again, it's kind of just another way to potentially confuse you, but make sure you understand, both passages and then go into the questions. And make sure, especially when you're reading the passage, the sections that have both passages, make sure you're reading in the questions what's passage 1 and what's passage 2. Okay. And then again, this is the 5th passage. So again, it's about a page. And I'm going to send you guys the links to all of these so you can kind of go through them individually. And if you want to take the practice test, feel free. I highly recommend it. But yeah, this is the last passage. It's about a page long. And again, there's no graph here. But we'll see, it follows the same format of questions. Okay. So again, there's 52 questions. And that's pretty much how it's going to look for you when you go in and you take the SAT. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to read the first passage in this practice test. I'm going to read it out loud to you guys. And then we're just going to go through the first 10 questions that go along with it. And I'll kind of tell you guys my thought process and how I would answer it throughout. Does anybody have any questions so far? We're okay? All right, so I'm going to read this passage to you guys. Again, this is kind of just to give you a little bit of a feel of what the reading sections will look like. So it says directions. Each passage or pair of passages below is followed by a number of questions. After reading each passage or pair, choose the best answer to each question based on what is stated or implied in the passage or passages and in any accompanying graphics, such as a table or graph. Okay, so questions 1 through 10 are based on the following passage. Even then, my only friends were made of paper and ink. At school, I had learned to read and write long before the other children. Where my school friends saw notches of ink on incomprehensible pages, I saw light, street, and people. Words and the mystery of their hidden signs fascinated me, and I saw in them a key with which I could unlock a boundless world, a safe haven from that home, those streets, and those troubled days in which even I could sense that only a limited fortune awaited me. My father didn't like to see books in the house. There was something about them, apart from the letters he could not decipher, that offended him. He used to tell me that as soon as I was 10, he would send me off to work and that I'd better get rid of all my scatterbrained ideas if I didn't want to end up a loser, a nobody. I used to hide my books under the mattress and wait for him to go out or fall asleep so that I could read. Once he caught me reading at night and flew into a rage. He tore the book from my hands and flung it out the window. If I catch you wasting electricity again, reading all this nonsense, you'll be sorry. My father was not a miser, and despite the hardships we suffered, whenever he could give me a few coins so that I could buy myself some treats like the other children. He was convinced that I spent them on licorice sticks, sunflower seeds, or sweets, but I would keep them in a coffee tin under the bed, and when I collected 4 or 5 reals, I'd secretly rush out to buy myself a book. My favorite place in the whole city was the Semper and Sons bookshop on Calle Santa Ana. It smelled of old paper and dust, and it was my sanctuary, my refuge. The bookseller would let me sit on a chair in a corner and read any book I liked to my heart's content. He hardly ever allowed me to pay for books he placed in my hands, but when he wasn't looking, I'd leave coins I'd managed to collect on the counter before I left. It was only small change. If I'd have to buy a book without pittance, I probably would have been able to afford only a booklet of cigarette papers. When it was time for me to leave, I would do so, dragging my feet, a weight on my soul. If it had been up to me, I would have stayed there forever. One Christmas, Semper gave me the best gift I have ever received. It was an old volume, read and experienced to the full. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, I read on the cover. I was aware that Semper knew a few authors who frequented his establishment, and judging by the care with which he handled the volume, I thought perhaps this Mr. Dickens was one of them. A friend of yours? A lifelong friend, and from now on, he's your friend too. That afternoon, I took my new friend home, hidden under my clothes so that my father wouldn't see it. It was a rainy winter with days as gray as lead, and I read Great Expectations about 9 times, partly because I had no other book at hand, partly because I did not think there could be a better one in the whole world, and I was beginning to suspect that Mr. Dickens had written it just for me. Soon I was convinced that I didn't want to do anything else in life but learn to do what Mr. Dickens had done. Okay, so after reading this passage, I would then think to myself, okay, what is a short summary in my head that I could think about this passage. So again, it's about this boy, and his father did not agree with him reading because he wanted him to spend his time doing other things. And this kid would go to the bookshop, and it was kind of, again, like he said, his sanctuary. And he was never really had to pay for these books. But then he got this book, and it was the best book he ever received. So it really shows that reading and books and writing is very important to this child. So in my head, that's kind of just the summary that I would formulate. So then I put the questions here just to make it a little easier, and we're just going to go through the 10 questions. So question 1, it says, over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from A. So a general discussion of the narrator's love of reading to a portrayal of influential incident. B, depiction of the narrator's father to an examination of an author with whom the narrator becomes enchanted. C, symbolic representation of a skill the narrator possesses to an example of its application. And D, tale about the hardships of the narrator's childhood to an analysis of the effects of those hardships. Okay, so right off the bat, I know that D is not the right answer because there's no analysis of the effects that the hardships had on this child. So we already know that D is not the right answer. So I'm just going to highlight it red. Okay, and then C, a symbolic representation of a skill the narrator possesses to an example of its application. That could be right, but let's see what else. B, depiction of the narrator's father to an examination of an author with whom the narrator becomes enchanted. I don't think so, because this kind of focuses again on this child, on the narrator, rather than the father. And then A, general discussion of the narrator's love of reading to a portrayal of influential incident. So A would be the answer. So this is the correct answer. Because again, C looks like it's kind of right, but we don't see an example of the application. So again, like we saw in those study tips, maybe the first part kind of seems right, but the second part's not right. So this would not be the right answer. Okay. So let's go on to question 2. So question 2, the main purpose of lines 1 through 10 is to, so like I said earlier, each of the passages have very similar question format. So you're going to pretty much see in each of the passages this format. So here you want to make sure you focus just on lines 1 through 10. Because if you focus outside of that, even if it's something that does have to do with the passage, if it's not in lines 1 through 10, it's not going to be correct. So let's take a look back at lines 1 through 10, and we're thinking about the main purpose. So 1 through 10 says, even then, my only friends were made of paper and ink. At school, I had learned to read and write long before the other children. Where my school friends saw notches of ink on incomprehensible pages, I saw lights, streets, and people. Words and the mystery of their hidden science fascinated me, and I saw in them a key with which I could unlock a boundless world, a safe haven from that home, those streets and those troubled days in which even I could sense that only a limited fortune awaited me. Okay. So the main purpose of lines 1 through 10 is to A, introduce the characters who play a part in the narrator's story. B, list the difficult conditions the narrator endured in childhood. C, describe the passion that drives the actions the narrator recounts. Or D, depict the narrator's aspirations before he met Semper. So here the correct answer would be C. So clearly in lines 1 through 10, he is just describing the passion that he has for reading, right? So when we look at the other ones, yes, they are kind of correct when you think about the passage as a whole, but again, we're looking at lines 1 through 10. So yeah, D could be kind of right because it depicts the narrator's aspirations, but it's not totally correct because we don't even know about Semper yet. B lists the difficult conditions the narrator endured in childhood. It doesn't really talk about what the difficult conditions he endured during childhood. Again, his father didn't like that he read, but he gave him money for sweets and whatnot anyways. And again, it's not in lines 1 through 10, so it's not correct. A, introduce the characters who play a part in the narrator's story. Again, when you look at lines 1 through 10, there's really no characters that are brought up yet. It's kind of just showing the passion that he has for reading. We don't even see the father yet in lines 1 through 10. So again, C would be the correct answer. Okay. So then question 3, with which of the following statements about his father would the narrator most likely agree? So again, we don't want to put our own personal opinions in here. We're thinking about what would the narrator agree with about a statement about his father. So A, he lacked affection for the narrator. B, he disliked any unnecessary use of money. C, he would not have approved of Semper's gift. And D, he objected to the writings of Charles Dickens. So again, when we look at these, we know A is not right because it says in the passage that the father would give the child money for sweets and whatnot. And again, he just didn't approve of him spending reading. He just didn't approve of him reading because he didn't think it was necessary. So that's not correct. And then B, he disliked any unnecessary use of money. So when you kind of take a first look at this, you could think this may be right. But again, we see in the passage, whenever he could, he gave me a few coins so that I could buy myself some treats like the other children. So again, he would give the child money when he could. C, he would not have approved of Semper's gift. So C, I believe, is the right answer, but let's just look at D. D, he objected to the writings of Charles Dickens. So we don't really see anything about the father even knowing about the Charles Dickens book. So again, this would not be correct. So C, he would not have approved of Semper's gift because he would not approve of his son getting a book that he did not want him reading. So C is the right answer. I hope this all makes sense to you guys so far. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. If you want me to slow down, let me know. And again, I'm going to send you guys this practice test along with some other ones. All right, so question 4. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So again, we're looking for the best evidence here. So I'm going to highlight that for the answer to the previous question. So the SAT writers do this a lot where they have one question and then they kind of ask a follow-up question that has to do with the previous one. And again, this kind of gets you to think a little bit more. It may try to confuse you a little bit, but we're going to dive into this. So which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? And again, what they typically do is they'll give you lines that you have to go back and find, and you have to find the best one. So again, our answer is he would not have approved of Semper's gift. And now we need to find evidence from the passage about this. So lines 24 to 27 says, my father is not a miser, and despite the hardships we suffered, whenever he could, he gave me a few coins so I could buy myself some treats like the other children. He was convinced that I spent them on licorice sticks, sunflower seeds, or sweets. So again, this would not be the right answer because it doesn't align with our previous answer. So again, this has nothing to do with the book that he received. So A would not be the right answer. Okay, and then we are going to go to the next one, lines 35 to 37. Why would this thing go away? Okay, so 35 to 37. The bookseller would let me sit on a chair in a corner and read any book I liked to my heart's content. He hardly ever allowed me to pay for the books he placed in my hands, but when he wasn't looking, I'd leave the coins I'd managed to collect on the counter before I left. So again, this wouldn't be the right answer because it doesn't have anything to do with the father. Okay. So C, lines 37 to 38. So 5, 36, 37. He hardly ever allowed me to pay for the books he placed in my hands, but when he wasn't looking, I'd leave the coins I managed to collect on the counter before I left. So again, this has kind of nothing to do with the father. It has to do with the child getting the book. So this wouldn't be the right answer. And then D, lines 59 to 61. That afternoon, I took my friend home, hidden under my clothes so that my father wouldn't see it. So here we can clearly see that this would be the right answer because it goes along with question 3, that he, the father, would not have approved of the gift. And that we see it because the child is hiding the book under his bed so that his father would not find it. So we know that D is definitely the right answer. And what makes this even trickier is that if you don't have the right answer for the previous question, it's going to totally throw you off for this one. Because again, let's say we picked for question 3, let's say he disliked any unnecessary use of money. We could have used another one of these to back that up. But again, you want to make sure you have the right answer here so you can get the right answer there. So they're going to help each other out. Okay. So question 5, it can reasonably be inferred from the passage that the main reason the narrator considers great expectations to be the best gift he ever received is because. So again, here we have to infer from the passage, so it's not going to be directly said in the passage. The main reason the narrator considers great expectations to be the best gift he ever received was. All right, so let's work backwards here. Semper was a friend of the book's author. C, the gift meant that Semper held him in high regard. B, he'd only ever been given sweets and snacks as gifts in the past. And A, reading the book convinced him that he wanted to be a writer. So here, it would be really helpful to use one of the tips we previously looked at. And that is, always refer back to the passage. So here we have to make sure we can find evidence from the passage that's going to support our answer. So here, the correct answer would be A. Reading the book convinced him that he wanted to be a writer. And where do we see this in the passage? It's at the very end. And then it says, it was a rainy winter with days as gray as lead, and I read Great Expectations about 9 times, partly because I had no other book at hand, partly because I did not think there could be a better one in the whole world, and I was beginning to suspect that Mr. Dickens had written it just for me. And then here, soon I was convinced that I didn't want to do anything else in life but learn to do what Mr. Dickens had done. So here, even though it's not clearly stated, we learn that the narrator wants to become a writer because obviously Charles Dickens wrote Great Expectations, which he was given as a gift. So we can infer from that sentence that reading the book convinced him that he himself wanted to be a writer. And again, B has nothing to do with the book. Yes, Great Expectations could be the best gift he ever received because the only things he'd been given were sweet and snacks, but we don't know what else. He could have received books other times, but we just don't know that. So we can't really infer that from the passage. C, the gift meant that Semper held him in high regard. Again, it could be a reason, but is it the main reason? So here we have to look, what's the better answer? Again, A is the better answer here. And D. Semper was a friend of the book's author. So again, it could be a reason, but we have to kind of play around here and see what the main reason, the best answer is. Okay. So we're almost done going through these examples, guys. Okay, so question 6. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So again, as we see here, as we saw earlier on, we need to use the answer from the previous question to help us find the answer for this question. So again, our answer from the previous question was reading the book convinced him that he wanted to be a writer. So which choice provides the best evidence of why the narrator wanted to become a writer? So we kind of went through this in the last question. Again, we found the evidence that supported why it was the main reason. So it kind of makes this question easy because we already found it in the passage. So we kind of already know the last 2 lines. Soon I was convinced that I didn't want to do anything else in life but learn to do what Mr. Dickens had done. So again, D is clearly the correct answer here because that is where it states that the narrator wants to become a writer, or we can infer from that sentence that he wants to become a writer. And here I'm not going to go through all those other ones again, but again, you want to make sure you look at each line, know why that line is not the correct answer, and know why, and then you'll understand why this one is the correct answer. Okay, question 7. The narrator indicates that he pays Semper. Okay, so if we remember in the passage where he talks about leaving coins for Semper, right? So that's where we want to look in the passage to find out how he pays him. So I'm just going to highlight that again. And this is helpful when you're looking at the test on paper to kind of underline keywords that are going to help you. That's always kind of what I do. I know he didn't really talk about that in those 10 tips, but that's just one of my personal tips. I always like to underline or highlight the main words that are going to help me understand the question. So the narrator indicates that he pays Semper. So let's go back to the passage and find that. Okay, so right here. So line 37, he hardly ever allowed me to pay for the books he placed in my hands, but when he wasn't looking, I'd leave the coins I'd managed to collect on the counter before I left. It was only small change. If I'd have to buy a book with that pittance, I probably would have been able to afford only a booklet of cigarette papers. So again, what we can infer here is the money that he did leave for him sometimes wouldn't have even bought him a book. So let's see. A, less than Semper expects him to pay for the books. So again, we know this isn't the right answer because he would not charge him for any of the books. He would give him for free. And he would, the narrator would just leave change sometimes when he wasn't looking. B, nothing, because Semper won't take his money. So again, this goes back to one of our tips from earlier on. Yes, the first part of the answer is correct. We think he doesn't pay him anything, and because he won't take his money, but that's not true because again, he leaves the coins for him. So we know, okay, part of the answer sounds like it could be correct, but the entire answer is not, so it's not correct. Okay. C, the money he makes selling sweets to the other children. Again, we don't really see that he does that. There's no evidence in the passage that he sells sweets to the other children and saves the money. He doesn't even buy the sweets. So then D, much less for the books than they are worth. So D is the correct answer because again, we saw in that passage that I just read that he does pay for the books when Semper isn't looking. But again, he doesn't pay him enough, what they are worth. So it says here again, I would only be able to afford a booklet of cigarette paper. So it's not what the books are worth, but Semper doesn't care. So again, D is the correct answer. All right, question 8. as used in line 44, wait most nearly means, okay, so these ones are really important because typically they give you a word, right? And you think you know what it means, but you need to look at how it's used in the passage to be able to determine which answer is the most correct. So again, when you look at these, you could argue that any of these could be used to define weight, but we need to look in the passage in that specific line to see which one is most close. So line 44. When it was time for me to leave, I would do so, dragging my feet, a weight on my soul. Okay, so A, bulk. So no, that wouldn't be correct because he's talking about a figurative weight, right? B, burden. So burden is the correct answer because again, like I said, it's like a metaphorical weight. It's because he didn't want to have to leave the bookstore. So it was like a burden for him. He didn't want to have to leave. It was, it was sad for him. So C, force. Again, this would not be the correct answer. And D, clout. This one doesn't really even make sense. So you kind of just can erase that one right off the bat. So again, the correct answer, sorry, I just highlighted those wrong, would be burden. Okay, 2 more questions. So this kind of goes along with the same format as the previous question. The word friend is used twice in lines 57 and 58. 2. So here we're going to look at the word friend and see why it's used twice in those specific lines. So 57 to 58. So again, you're going to be constantly going back from the passage to the questions because you always want to have evidence that supports. So the word friend is used twice in lines 57 and 58. So a friend of yours, a lifelong friend, and from now on, he's your friend too. Okay, so does it A, underline the importance of the narrator's connection to Semper? Maybe. Let's look at the other ones though. B, stress how friendships helped the narrator deal with his difficult home situation. So this wouldn't be the right answer because we're not even talking about friendships and his difficult home situation. We're not even kind of using that. Like when they're talking about friend here, we're not even in that realm at the moment. So that would not be the right answer. C, emphasize the emotional connection Semper feels to reading. Okay, that one sounds like it could be right too. Or D, imply that the narrator's sentiments caused him to make an irrational decision. So again, here, there's no irrational decision being made, so this wouldn't be. So we have 2 answers here. Either A, underline the importance of the narrator's connection to Semper, or C, emphasize the emotional connection Semper feels to reading. So although both of these sound like they could be correct, and this one was a little difficult when I was looking at it as well, the correct answer would be C, because again, they're kind of talking about a metaphorical friend here, like kind of the connection that they made with Charles Dickens while reading the book. So it's not really talking about their friendship. So the narrator's connection to Semper, they're kind of talking about the emotional connection that Semper feels to reading, that he is also passing that on to the narrator. So A would not be the right answer. Okay, and the last one, question 10. Which statement best characterizes the relationship between Semper and Charles Dickens? Okay, so Semper models his own writing after Dickens' style. So again, we don't see anything like that in the passage, so we know that wouldn't be correct. And if you were to go back and look in the passage, you wouldn't see any of that. So if you don't have something to back it up, it's not going to be the right answer. Semper is an avid admirer of Dickens' work. Okay, yeah. C, Semper feels a personal connection to details of Dickens' biography. So again, we don't see something this in-depth within the passage, so it wouldn't be the right answer. And D, Semper considers himself to be Dickens' most appreciative reader. Again, we don't really see anything like that. So B would be the correct answer because he's an avid admirer of Dickens' work. He doesn't consider himself to be the most appreciative, but he's definitely an admirer. And as he's, we can see that as he passes on the book to the narrator who also has an appreciation for reading. Okay, so that was just the one passage that we're gonna kind of go through. I just wanted to show you guys my thought process on how I go through the answers and kind of deciding when it's really difficult to go between two answers, which one is the most correct and why. It's really important to go back into the passage and look. And again, all of the passages have the same or similar format to these questions. So you're going to see kind of a repeat of the format throughout. So I just wanted to kind of go through that with you guys. So when you're going through practice tests, you can kind of think to yourself, you can kind of use the same thought process. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you guys some free online materials to help you study. So today I got the practice test from Khan Academy, and this is such a helpful website. They have tons of practice tests. It doesn't seem to be loading. Nope. Okay, why isn't this going away? All right, so it's really helpful because this website gives you a bunch of tips. It tells you what to expect and what to bring. And what I really liked about this website is you can print out full-length SATs to take on paper. So it gives you all of these different SATs that you can take. So again, you can use this for math as well. It's the entire SAT. So that's kind of what I went through with you guys today. We did the practice test 8, and it gives you the entire thing. And then what you can do is they also give you an answer sheet. So you can kind of act like you're going through the entire process of taking the SAT. And you can print this all out and bubble everything in. And then what's even cooler about it is there is an answer sheet. So then you can score yourself and you can kind of figure out what score you would get if you were actually taking this SAT in person. And then you can see again where you need to improve, what you need to work on, what you're excelling in at the moment. And it kind of helps you as you continue to study and do better. So again, it comes with the scoring sheet as well. So I strongly recommend using this website, Khan Academy. Again, we're going to be sending you guys this PowerPoint, I believe. So you guys will have access to all of these resources. Khan Academy is so helpful. Again, highly recommend. And then this is the College Board website. So I'm not sure if you guys have registered yet, but this is also where you would register and access your SAT scores. But they also have practice tests, sample questions. Again, they have the paper ones, or you can do it online. So it's kind of like a real-time online SAT practice. And then you get feedback too. So you get constant feedback on progress so you know where you stand. So again, really helpful. And then finally, this is called 4 tests. And this is just online practice test. So again, you don't print it out, but you kind of take it in real time. So this is starting off with the math section, but you'll kind of see what resources work best for you and which ones you want to use. Again, Khan Academy, strongly recommend. It's also on the College Board website, so clearly it's a great website. And that's really it. So does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? I hope that was helpful for all of you. Kind of going through my thought process and whatnot, but if you guys have any questions, we have about a half hour left, so feel free. For tests, I believe it does, yeah. So when you go through it, it tells you You can mark it for review and you can see your answers. You can view the correct answer as well. Anybody else have any questions? No? All right, well, if you guys do have any questions, feel free to reach out to the library. Again, we're going to send you guys these resources. And I hope that this was really helpful for you guys. And good luck on your SATs and good luck with the rest of the school year.